Hi, Claire.
Hi, Scotty.
How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Very well.
Very
So,
well.
we have a new America.
We have, we have a new president-elect.
President-elect.
We have the same America,
Same America.
but we kind of have an idea a little bit more of what we're working with.
Oh, truly.
And we have some more people on board and kind of working together for something.
Right.
Which is hard for the Democrats.
Very hard.
That's the struggle. That's the hurdle.
Yeah. So, let's back up a little bit. So, we didn't have an episode last week because we knew that things were going to be a little crazy. And
no one has time for that when you're stressed out.
What else would we be talking about other than our anxiety about the election?
I mean, everyone's seen Steve Kornacki memes. No one needs to hear me talk about John King and how great he is at tapping a screen.
Right.
Just sit at home and watch it. I'm sorry. I work full time and I'm in school and I'm living through the most stressful historical part of my life, even though I've been alive for a lot of other historical things. So we need a minute.
Right.
Stand break.
Needed a minute. And we knew that the results were going to take a minute. And it was
been doing this podcast for about 45 seconds. I need a break.
I need a break already. No, seriously, we knew that it was going to take a minute to get the results in. And we wanted to make sure that there was enough to dissect and...
Right. I'm not Katie Tur, so I'm not capable of minute to minute political conversation. I'm capable of counting how many Bud Light bottles we have in house. I'm capable of waitressing, but I'm not capable of step by step responsibly discussing the election.
That we could start it off with that. The journey of the week was okay, key race alert. 50 new votes just came into Arizona. Right. And then we
talked to some women who are voting. They voted. Here are the women. They're in a parking lot. It's what is this news? What's happening?
Yeah. So let me ask you, when did you kind of feel as if it was going to go in our favor? Did you feel it night of, or?
I will say I've been cautiously optimistic since night of, because I think night of, it sort of seemed like it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Because a lot of these places that were borderline couldn't actually count their mail-in votes until election day. Seems a little counterintuitive, but that's how election law works. It's different in different places. So, I mean, I was hopeful. My best friend lived in Philadelphia. She went back to Philadelphia to vote, and she lives in Fishtown in Philadelphia, which is a very progressive, artistic part of the city.
Right. I love Fishtown.
And also I'm from New Jersey, so I know Philly, and I'm from the part of New Jersey that's blue. And that kind of line goes across New Jersey, from Manhattan across New Jersey and into Philly.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm from in that area. So to me, everyone from there is Democratic and liberal and progressive. That's not really the case though.
Right.
Jersey went red, actually, I think, right? No, they eventually went blue, but at first they were red, and I also wasn't surprised by that.
Right.
So that's kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I ever was 100% sure, and I still am kind of, not that I think there's enough military votes to change it or votes from wherever to change it, and John King's doing a really good job of being I will discuss every county that's still up in the air, but math is math. I'm kind of more concerned about the transition than I am who is actually won, because I think it's clear that it's Joe Biden. Of course, he's the president-elect, but
I think we
all
knew
Trump going to.
I think we all knew even before election night that the transition was going to be a mess. It was going to be very messy because Trump's a petulant child, and he has never really taken a loss well, including losing an Emmy. So it was. Right.
And there's even small details, the little note that the old president leaves to the new president.
Right.
And that's just an historical thing.
It's just not going to be
there. Hey, boo, good luck. It's hard. He might not do that, and what that means, and the sign of disrespect, and her getting rid of the rose garden, and all these little subtleties of it too. Are they going to steal the curtains and leave a furniture that's not theirs? Andrew Jackson's or more. Well, just like dip with it because they want it. Like, are they just that terrible of people that even when it comes down to the really superficial things, they're just going to be children about everything?
Well, and not to like ride the line that, some progressive liberals like to call Trump a illegitimate president, which, for whatever reason, like we can like talk about that, but he was voted in, he served his 4 years, and he was legitimately voted out. But all of these like norms that were overturned, all of these things that were not kind of followed, all of the institutions that were ignored, everything kind of speaks to that a little bit in terms of like a cliff notes. It's like, oh, everything was by the book. These 4 years was not, and now we're like back by the book. Right. It's kind of like, it really highlights him not being a traditional president, which to some people who voted for him's credit, that's the only redeeming way to, or that's the only redeeming
that's like excuse. Why that's part of his brand.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say, is that basically like, and like he was untraditional.
Andrew Jackson did a lot more, he changed the treasury and he did a lot more actual things.
Right.
But he's another president who, if you look at what actually happened in those, it's like balls to the wall, like random shit like that nobody else has ever done. And, he had a really strong, fervent, supporting group of people. He held rallies and people like sort of lauded him like a celebrity more than just the president. So it's not like completely unprecedented.
And he was deeply racist too.
Yeah. Also, he was deeply racist. A lot of similarities. So it's not like completely out of the realm of possibility that a president just kind of goes rogue.
Right.
Does it. Maybe ever like so often, like every 150 years, we just need somebody like shake it up.
I think, okay, so now we can talk about like transitioning into from a Trump administration to a Biden administration, what that means for America, and that like a lot of us who kind of feel like we've reclaimed America again, like we feel better.
Yeah.
But we also recognize that there's still a lot of work to be done, like especially our generation and Gen Z,
and the things that
very
we
progressive,
care about. Yeah,
very, very much involved with Medicare for all, very much want climate change addressed immediately.
Prison reform, police reform.
And even election reform, I
mean, if anything has taught us from 2000 on to now, is that we have terrible election policies.
Absolutely.
We have no uniformity. We got issues left, right, and center. People using Sharpies. You know what I mean? Like that whole hanging Chad thing that we went through for like 8 months in 2000 is just happening again.
Was it the Secretary of State or was it the Attorney General of Arizona? The blonde woman that was being interviewed from Arizona and who was dealt with Sharpiegate. She was like, yeah, that was ridiculous. Every time
ridiculous.
She kept saying, she goes, yeah, if anybody's trying to question how this is done, they don't know what they're talking about. And I was like, oh, you read a bitch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those jobs are not like high paying.
No.
It's not like people go into election law for the money.
No.
And then it's just like a shit show.
It'll be interesting to watch the Biden administration navigate their moderate lane. Because to me, being a moderate just tells me that you're malleable. You're kind of like, you don't really have
it's a nice way of saying that you've gone both ways.
Yeah,
voting
basically.
Wise, that sometimes you were kind of about war.
Right.
Oh, he's just a moderate Democrat.
Right. And same with the Republicans. They like to ride that lane too. So to me, I don't really see a differentiation between a moderate Republican and a moderate Democrat. Except like moderate Republicans often toe the Republican line, whereas moderate Democrats often compromise more. That's really the gist of it. So it'll be interesting to watch him do that. But what I'm most excited for is just not the daily update, bullshit. The daily chaos. It's just like, I wish that, politics is obviously part of our daily lives, especially when you're a minority or, a marginalized group. But the politics comes from activism, whereas like I don't need to know what the president is doing on a minute by minute basis or tweeting about nonsense. You know what I mean? I just don't want to think about government as much as I want to think about like the activists.
It's also piece. Like the world is probably like, thank God.
Truly.
We don't have to do this anymore. Like the National News of Ireland, RT, ended with like Joe Biden reading a poem from a famous Irish poet named Seamus Heaney, who was kind of like notorious for writing about like the working class and like regular people and struggle in life. And he's like an Irish poet. So it's not like it's about, it's not about, they're not love poems. They're always like about hardship and overcoming hardship and, character and all this stuff. And it's this big long poetry about character, and Joe Biden read it once because he's a huge Seamus Heaney fan by happenstance, which I think is kind of cool. And that's how they ended the news. It was like a montage of like America and like him looking at the fireworks and all these American people like waving gay pride flags and holding Black Lives Matter signs and overlaid with Joe Biden reading this like staunch piece of Irish poetry about how like the human condition is that when hard things happen to you, you turn it around and you become like soft and you help others.
Right.
I was like, whoa, this is like almost like borderline like democratic propaganda.
Yeah.
But that's how excited Ireland is to have somebody in the White House that they feel like is going to align with them, because they're going through a lot of Brexit stuff and they're going through a lot of like repeat of their rights by the United Kingdom kind of being infringed upon and their land being infringed upon. And Irish people are, they're Republican for Ireland, but they're not really Republican in general. They tend to be very democratic. So it's interesting to see sort of another country's reaction to this is like super positive, super emotional. Like, we got the right guy in there to help us out. I feel like a lot of European countries feel that way, especially because Europe is so like.
Well, and that was my biggest.
They're so not about Donald Trump because he is very like fascisty and like everyone like marching in the streets with flags and stuff. Like that shit's like very real to Europe.
Speaking to that was my biggest kind of like selling point to me for Biden. Obviously, like throughout the primaries, he was not my number one choice. But whenever it came to like big picture, it was like, okay, what is the benefit of him? Well, a lot of our allies and a lot of our relationships were built during the Obama administration via him.
Right.
And he was the one kind of doing all of that.
People see him as like a down-to-earth, good-natured American man.
He's a bridge builder.
Yes.
He really is a bridge builder. And, that may not work in our favor as progressives here at home, but on a global stance, it's going to make us like, it's just going to fix a lot of shit that like was not good for the last 4 years. Like when people are like, I don't know about America. Like, I don't know about America. Like,
And people in other countries kind of look to America as like the scale of like what's to come here. Like Boris in England often gets compared to Donald Trump, even if he's not necessarily doing exactly Donald Trump stuff in England. It just feels like that.
Yeah.
So now that America has like this democratic sort of more about equality, balance, and the regular man, that makes a lot of people in Europe who are working class feel like, okay, good, now my government's going to follow suit with that and not follow suit with being more like Donald Trump.
Oh, 100%. And
plus, Irish people love to say that every president has an ancestral hometown in Ireland. Can I just say, even Obama had one, and you can Google all of them, and every little village has a little picture of Obama and Clinton and the Bushes and like what like cottage their great grandfather lived in. It's like that's not a thing, but they make it a thing.
That's amazing. Well, and just like and then what you were saying, just to put a pin on it, just generally. The world doesn't have to revolve around America's
this one
news.
Motherfucker who's up at 3 a.m. because he had 17 Diet Cokes.
Truly, and it's not like the world. America loves to think the world revolves around it, and in some degree, economically, it does. Like whatever our economy looks like,
culturally, it turns things.
Yeah, but the world doesn't need to revolve around our president's tweets,
right? And just because something in our culture affects another culture doesn't mean that they don't have their own culture too.
Exactly. Like let them worry about their own stuff, which they likely largely are. But it was interesting watching. There was a lot of international clips floating around Twitter that people were tweeting out about like the BBC. That's like especially with we can segue into this. Basically, Trump's response to losing the election, which is basically I won.
No, I'm right.
No, I won. If you count the votes, I won.
Can't you see they're lying?
And it's interesting watching the world react to that, being like, this is unlike America. I don't know who this man is.
Right.
And then how
also very like dictatory.
Yeah, that's how they're viewing his response. So basically Trump is refusing to acknowledge loss, and the big takeaway and all of the sources to the news outlets and whatnot is that a lot of the people on the transition team are trying to figure out who's going to be the person to convince him to accept this.
The come to Jesus moment.
Who's going to therapize our president?
I don't know.
But like the fact that that's even a conversation that's happening. Like
who has to convince him?
Who has to convince him?
That's so sad. Yeah, no, it's really sad to think about. Like, I think I've said this before. I've definitely said it to you. I don't know if it was on the podcast, but like, that's the thing that's scary about Donald Trump is he brings up a lot of like in South America and Europe, like dictatorism, fascism, all that shit's like real.
Yeah.
Some of them like it. They're like, oh, Mussolini like wasn't that bad.
Oh my God.
We had a ton of sugar when he was in charge. Some people see it that way in Europe, and then some people see it as like. But either way, it's fresh on the brain. It's not like here where we're like, what is this? Like, what is happening? In other parts of the world, they're like, oh, this is just like that president in Africa or this guy in South America or this person. Like other leaders in the world have done this before. Just we have always kind of upheld this like unspoken, like gentlemanly agreement where like you just don't fucking act like an asshole. And Donald Trump was like, nah, son, I had a TV show on NBC once. I can do whatever I want. I was on The Simpsons. And that's how he thinks. And that's what ended up happening.
If anybody who deserved to act like an asshole, it was Obama, like transitioning to Trump after all of the shit. Like the racist birtherism, everything else that was said.
Which is how Trump's career in politics started, was on this very racist fucking platform.
Which I hope the media learns from that, in that if any of these fringe people start bringing up stupid things, don't give them the platform. I think
like if like Steve Baldwin's like holding a press conference, send an intern.
Send an intern and be like, do we need to cover this? Nah, okay.
Put it on the last page of USA Today that you get for free when you stay at the hotel. Don't put it on CNN breaking news.
But like I think one of the anchors did say that and said, in hindsight,
we shouldn't have done that.
We should have, because it was Cuomo. Chris Cuomo talked about how we gave rise to Trump with the birtherism, and he came out against some of those attacks early against Kamala Harris. He was trying to like dispel those because he saw them coming, and he kind of telegraphed it. It was a little bit of a fumble. He admitted that it was a fumble how he did that, but they do recognize that they played a large part in that. And
they gave him the mouthpiece. They saw the ratings go up, and they said, we like that.
Yeah. Well, his tantrums.
That's an issue. That's like how other countries have part of their election laws that you don't show candidates on TV a lot because people will use it to just get ratings, and that does affect the populace. And you can't just be irresponsible, and then say we're like the news. We're like so unbiased.
It's interesting because people will grab onto that specifically with a politician, because anything that isn't that doesn't sound like a prepared response, that doesn't sound like a traditional campaign style of, speech and speaking, they're going to grab onto it and be like, that's real. This person's real. I trust them because they sound real. And I believe, whether or not they're
just being upfront with it.
Yeah. It's like that. Like, it's the Kelly Dodd thing. She says it like she means it. Like kind of thing,
and that's why everybody loved her. And then you're like, oh shit, she's gonna keep saying what she means, and what she means is not very nice.
It's just dangerous to give credence to specifically people who are aiming for office when they speak like that. It's like those are the kind of people that should remain on the fringe.
Decency, character, etc. Like a lot of people, Van Jones said this, Biden said it, like you no longer have to explain to your child
that having
good character isn't an important thing.
Right.
Speaking of Kelly Dodd, did you watch Real Housewives of Orange County lately?
I have been watching it. She's not really on it a lot.
She's not really on it a lot. I love really a sneaky edit. They do it a lot on Below Deck, where they just fire a bitch, and then he's like there in the back, like swapping the deck, but like they never talk to him again, which is impressive because those boats aren't that big.
Right.
So I knew they were going to like have creative ways of dealing with it because they've done it with Project Runway. They did it with Drag Race.
Drag Race was Jerry Pie.
There's a lot of different examples in reality TV where the tea comes out when it's already been filmed, but the winner hasn't been announced.
Right.
So you're just kind of like, they didn't win and they're still going to be in it, but you'll see.
You'll see.
And like, you know, they just have like a smiley face emoji over their face.
To my knowledge, she's not scheduled or hasn't been and is not scheduled in the foreseeable future for Watch What Happens Live.
Yeah, because no one fucking cares what you have to say.
I think he's saving the confrontation for the reunion.
Right. It was interesting though, last episode, she talked a little bit about COVID and we started to see the story of her being
they're giving her a dirty edit. They're like, you're not getting this upfront edit.
They're setting her up where all at this point we all kind of were like, oh, it's just like SARS and oh, it's just like swine flu. But they show her saying that and like start to set up the like,
oh God,
she thinks she knows everything, she knows nothing kind of platform. But what I think is really interesting about Real Housewives is the discussion of being sober and sobriety.
Yeah.
And that a housewife is going on the journey of AA and the journey of becoming sober and discussing what that is like live in real time. Like that's I mean, I know Bronwyn's like a really rich lady from Malibu, so I'm not like gonna be like, oh, she's so brave.
Right.
But it is I think a really positive thing. I think Hunter Biden being somebody who struggles with addiction, it's such a huge American issue that we're so like, no, we can't talk about it.
Well, and
can't talk about alcoholism. Can't talk about anything, and we need policy on it. And I think that
100%.
Pop culture things like the Real Housewives of Orange County help these kinds of conversations.
True, and they've tried to have these conversations on other franchises before, starting with Kim Richards back in Beverly Hills.
But it was always very quiet, behind the curtain.
And then New York,
she does one interview like by herself. Yes, I was in rehab. The end.
Then we get New York. Leah's actually now sober again,
right?
And it's like they've learned from, the Kim Richards and then the Luann piece, which was like sobriety light. Not really. It was like more for court order.
Sobriety.
Yeah, basically like that. And now like Leah is talking about her sobriety journey.
How it's more of like a mental health journey.
It seems to be a new wave of like tackling some of these issues on reality TV because, it's interesting.
A big part of the fight was...
You're right. It's very interesting because these things permeate culture, which then affect change in ways, and whether people want to admit it or not. Fluff stuff in pop culture
gets you talking about something, and if you're talking about something, you're thinking about something. If you're thinking about something, it's probably going to affect your day to day
because it's approachable and digestible in these mediums, as opposed to being like a doctor on CNN being like, well, these are the stats.
Right. You're like, oh, Emily is talking to Bronwyn about how she's very difficult to deal with because she's always drunk.
Yeah.
And Gina's backing this up by saying, yeah, you're a snappy chihuahua. You're hammered all the time. I can't speak to you. And she screams out at her, I know, I'm sober. I have come to this realization. I was like, this is some deep fucking shit.
And she even said, she goes, this is why I've been pregnant so many times. She goes, if I wasn't pregnant, I was drunk. If I wasn't drunk, I was pregnant. Wild. That was a very impactful thing for her to say, I felt.
And I know a lot of people, I think just because of my industry, it's just statistically proven that people in my industry struggle with addiction. So I know a lot of people who are in recovery, who are 4, 5, whatever it might be, years sober. And they don't really have a lot of people that they can see themselves in on TV too. And I think representation always matters. We all have, we have a lot of issues when it comes to representation that are bigger and maybe bigger demographics. But I think it's really important that there's somebody on TV who's struggling with addiction and is successful almost in a way with it. And it's not like just the sad, beat down story like she's a junkie. It's like, no, people can just struggle with addiction day to day and have it just be like a mental health issue that they deal with.
And like it doesn't need to be Because most addiction is not what you see on Intervention. A lot of addiction is somebody that you're like, oh, I notice they drink a lot, but they go to work, they raise their family, they do the thing, you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily as nefarious or dark as we like to
there's
paint.
A clip,
it's not sensationalized in that way. A lot of it is this normalcy,
right. And there's a clip in the next upcoming episode where Emily's like, well, you weren't drunk then, and she was like, no, I was drunk the whole time. And Emily's like, no, you weren't. It's like, yeah, no, like that's what addiction is. So I don't know, I just thought it was pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
I think that Hunter Biden, having gone through what he's gone through and trying to turn his life around, and it's kind of a null and void. It's, first of all, you can't judge people by their families, but second of all, you can be a working family with a mom who has a job and a son who has struggles with an addiction and maybe doesn't have the most clear record in life. And that doesn't mean that you're not good people. Like, you know what I mean? Right. You're not good, hardworking, educated people. It's just some people struggle. And I mean, when he was a kid, he went through some pretty fucking traumatic shit.
That's what I was going to say. His story is hard. And also, I hated all of that rhetoric around Hunter specifically because, first of all, it's like an unspoken rule. Families of politicians are off limits, even on campaign. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he had there was nothing that would have impacted Joe himself. And frankly, this kind of shows what the Republican Party kind of how they view addiction. They view it as punitive. And in the 4 years, I remember they talked about addressing the opioid epidemic, but they never did.
Right.
And, maybe, this could be used as a, point in this next administration to, hey, we have to address addiction in a very real, health way and not a criminal way.
Because that's what all the jokes about Oregon decriminalizing, especially in the hippie music community. People are like, oh, let's go to Oregon, man, get fucked up. But Oregon's very progressive and they're looking ahead. Decriminalizing all those things is a step towards helping people. So it's fun to make like an Oregon Trail meme that says you're going to go smoke crack. Everybody loves a good meme.
Right.
But
there's a very real point.
There is a thought process behind it, and we talked about this, is that if it works in other countries, it might work here.
Yeah, 100%.
If you're mad about all the needles in the streets, why don't you look into treating these people like they're people?
Right. Because it's definitely a health crisis. It's more healthcare than it is, the
Shout
justice
out to
system.
Recovery High on MTV if you want to learn more about addiction.
Oh yeah,
it's a good watch. It's very emotional.
Yeah,
but it's also about Massachusetts, so I feel like we kind of live in the center of a big opioid crisis.
All right. Well, with all of that, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back to discuss how both parties separately are handling this election decision.
Where's the money, Lincoln Project?
Basically. We'll be back. Hey guys, so we're just taking a small break just to remind you all to follow us on all of our social media. You can find us at Having a Time Podcast over on Instagram and Having a Time Pod over on Twitter. You can find exclusive videos, photos, content, memes, all the things. So check us out over there. And now back to the episode. All right, and we're back. So let's discuss how both of these parties are responding to this election result, the Biden-Harris administration. We can start off with the Lincoln Project, Claire.
The Lincoln Project.
The Lincoln Project.
The thing about the Lincoln Project is, did you actually help? No one likes you. No one is feeling like you did anything for them.
Right.
And you also just created a lot of videos for my friend's brother to share on Facebook. And he lives in the basement of their parents' house. You know what I mean? They were just fueling the fire of the idiots.
Right.
On both sides.
Both sides.
Sometimes it just, the one about Covfefe and it was Avita and Covita. You put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
But it's still really shitty. and it doesn't do or help anybody.
Well, I mean, there's anecdotal evidence up front that it actually helped gain Donald Trump more votes.
Right. So, like, what were you really up
their
to?
Their goal was not met. Right. Either way.
Or was that their goal? So that's the new discussion is, are they just shady characters, shady folk? And likely they probably are. Politics is fucked up.
It's true. But I would give that theory a little bit more credence if they were more organized, but they just don't seem to be.
I know, but maybe that's also part of the plan. Like the RNC is like, look real sloppy with it too, so that it looks like you're just a grassroots organization that it got away from you.
But both parties are speaking out against the Lincoln Project, so I think either way, their mission statement was not accomplished.
Right. And then so much money goes into politicking that both sides stay asking you for money. They stay asking for money.
Right.
Because you end up in debt, and then the hope is that you win. And then if you win, the people that you lobby for are like, I'll pay you money.
Right.
If you're like, I love Kraft cheese, Kraft is like, okay, we'll give you money if you win. But then if you lose, you can have an issue. And sometimes even if you win, you can have an issue. Like when I worked for Elizabeth Warren and she won, I remember the guy that ran the non-for-profit that I was technically working for. I didn't work for her campaign. I worked for a non-for-profit that was Democrat.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, like they need money. Like if you don't mind, there was like some sort of offer to like give our last stipend into the fund.
Right.
And I was like, sorry, I just moved to Boston. I need that $80. Thanks. But he was like, yeah, to pay for it. Because some people who work on campaigns, they're just like hoping they get that check, but they might not get paid. I was like, oh, it must be nice to be a Harvard graduate working high up in Elizabeth Warren's campaign, that you have the ability to not get paid week to week. But I did not have the ability to not get paid week to week. Right. And I was so confused. I was like, she won. What do we need money for? It's over. And he was like, no, but bitches got to get paid, and we got to pay back like Kinko's for all the copies. And you know, sometimes the overhead of where you have an office space might be a gift.
Yeah.
But it's not a gift. It's like a gift until you have the money to pay me kind of gift. Like, damn, that sucks. And now the Republicans want money, they say, for recounting, but it's not.
So let's to put a pin on that, basically the Lincoln Project was an absolute failure on both fronts. So now the shift in the focus for the Republicans has been largely the establishment has not congratulated Biden. They haven't publicly, accepted the results, minus a few that are, have been on the fringe of the Republican Party, at least as the Republican Party has been a Trump party, like Mitt Romney, like people like that. Right. And you actually have Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz actively going on Fox, still spewing out the propaganda that Trump may actually have a path, which mathematically he does not. So what the campaign is now doing, they are sending out these emails to their supporters and donors, anybody who's contributed money, basically asking for money to support the recount. Some of these emails, if I can find some, I'll put them on our Instagram. They're wild. This one was so aggressive. It's like, basically like, this is your last chance to get Donald Trump elected. Don't let us down, basically kind of like messaging. So they're asking for money to support the recounts in all of these states, which it's just not fruitful.
Yeah.
But I do. A lot of these journalists have pointed out that the fine print at the bottom of these emails are saying that 60% of their donations are going towards campaign debt. So they may actually have
that's alternative motive all end up
to get this money. So like
it's
their
not
motive,
going to the recount. It's going to pay for Mr. I knock on doors for Donald Trump.
Right. They're going for that. And
which,
it's interesting.
LOL about the mismanagement of money. It seems like that's a brand thing for Trump.
It's true.
Spend. Oh, we'll get it back. We'll get it back. You got to spend money to make money.
And it's interesting.
Never has worked out for him.
Because it kind of speaks to exactly what we've experienced with Trump as like an entity. He's a marketer. He's not somebody who actually does the work.
Right. Give me $100 million for my water bottle company.
Right.
I'll make you $1 billion and sell so many water bottles. And then you're sitting on crates of water bottles. You didn't make dick.
Right.
But he has the money.
Don't
worry. He made money, but you didn't. So, that's kind of like how he's done real estate, how he's done fucking everything.
Exactly. So he's asking for all this money, but then I think the concept of him being able to win with oh my god, we'll get to that later. It's my having a time, I believe, but he's talking about this recount, and he's getting these people going out there to talk about it and promote it to get these funds. But I really think it's just to keep that base energized for whatever they need them for over the next 4 years. I really believe that none of these Republicans actually believe that Trump is going to be in office. They're trying to hang on to that energy because they know without Trump's energy, a lot of that base is just going to like disappear.
Yeah.
They're just going to like go back to being not engaged citizens like they had been for a while.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of discussion about like everybody I've seen that voted for Trump is like, oh, well, have fun having your taxes raised.
Yeah.
And it gets so aggressive to the point where people are like, well, it just doesn't even matter. I've just accepted that I'm going to have to pay taxes for the rest of my life because I don't care about. Some girl I used to know is like, I don't want kids. Why I got to pay for the schools? Bitch, I don't have a car, but I pay taxes for the road. What the fuck are you talking about? But people are so like wanting to hold on to that idea. And then also like, no one listens to me. Like no one listens to little old poor upper middle class white me.
I understand that excuse, like I'm paying for things in taxes that I don't want to pay for, always gets me, especially when it comes to health insurance, because they're like, I don't want to pay for insurance for other people to use. I'm like, do you understand that that's how insurance generally works in general? So if you're paying Blue Cross and Blue Shield,
always what insurance is.
Like if you're paying your premium to Blue Cross Blue Shield, you don't use it that year.
Yeah.
Somebody else has used it. So you've essentially like funded somebody else using it. That's just how insurance works.
$5 when it's only for old people, and it's the biggest company in the country that sells it because they can sell it for that much because they have so much money and everyone's about to die anyway. People are dumb.
People are dumb. Like I have a car insurance. I have to have car insurance. It's the law. If you have a car, you have to have car insurance. I didn't use it at all last year.
Right.
But somebody else used that.
And also because you're a dude, you pay more car insurance than me because it's statistically proven that you are going to be a more reckless driver when you've never even smoked a cigarette, and I'm literally the most reckless fucking human being on earth. Shit doesn't make sense sometimes, but that's life.
That's life. It's just like sometimes you got to pay things to get things, and that's it. So
I just love people driving down roads, stopping at stop signs. Going to libraries. This woman's husband went to community college. It is very funny to me that you are so anti-taxes when you have benefited from them in so many different ways. Oh, wait, you work at a state-run hospital. Who do you think pays your paychecks, bitch? Right. But people just get so upset that they feel like they're not being heard because of the 3 R's of republicanism. They feel like religion is being stunted, that we're not a Christian country because we're not. They feel like they took our jobs, or like culturally their little suburban bubble is changing, and so they're upset. But I don't know. I don't really feel bad for people like that because you have not adapted, evolved as a human being.
Right.
You are holding on really hard to a generation before you's thoughts and beliefs and feelings because they're your mom, your dad, your grandpa, whatever.
Right.
There's a reason why time goes on. There's a reason why we have new generations.
It's true.
We're supposed to evolve. If I thought exactly like my mom and dad who grew up in a farm in Ireland and I'm from New Jersey, that wouldn't be very productive. You know what I mean? There are no horses where I'm from in New Jersey.
Which honestly, that perfect segue into how the Democratic Party is handling this. So largely, even though we won the White House, we lost a number of seats in the House, and we are on the cusp of matching the Senate. We're not going to take it over.
No.
And the 2 seats that are still up for grabs are going to be runoffs in January. So we may still very much like not have the Senate at all. So for all argument's sake, it was not a sweeping success for the Democrats this election. There are definitely opportunities, and now there's a lot of
legalization of marijuana in certain states. That we had some
policy things that went through from voters, but in terms of like power and in terms of like the branches of government, we're shaky. So and now of course, like Democrats love to do, because we are equal opportunity draggers here. They love to point fingers rather than discussing and trying to fix the problems.
Yeah, why was it so close? It was the liberal progressives.
It was the progressives.
Why was it so close? It was the liberal moderates. It was you. It was you.
So because this election campaign was mostly trying to appeal to that moderate independent lane, obviously a lot of these losses are being chalked up to the progressive movement. Namely, they're talking about Medicare for all. They're talking about defund the police. They're talking about all of these things that are generally polled. If you poll people correctly, they're very popular on bipartisan lines. Like Medicare for all is largely popular. It's like 60 to 70% of people support that. So you have the John Kasichs, the never Trump Republican, saying, "Oh, the socialists of the party almost cost the election." Then you have the moderate Democrats, the woman from Virginia. But then you have AOC coming out with receipts being like, hey, everybody who was in a competitive state who ran on a progressive agenda, ran on Medicare for all, we all won our races.
Right.
And it's the moderates that lost.
And also keep in mind that, like the lady I saw on CNN this morning, she's from Virginia, so she's worried about her next election.
Right.
So let me be real moderate, because I want everybody in Virginia to like me. They're not worried about the greater country. AOC has the benefit of being from a district where it aligns with her political ideals for the country.
Very true.
But she is thinking about the whole fucking country, in my opinion.
Well, and she even talked about she extended her assistance, not even just going out stumping for them. She was offering tools for helping all of these people. And she said only 5 of them accepted her offer of assistance. And she made some good points. And she said it's just logistics. It's not necessarily you have to run on a progressive agenda. It's that you're not putting the money into the campaigning where you should. She said a lot of these places where they lost, their digital output of funds was like $2,000. And it was just like the week before.
How it works. But like Stacey Abrams is one of those people that like this grassroots campaigning that Democrats kind of always say is the core of democracy and the core of the party, but then they kind of fight against it. And that's sort of like AOC was saying, was like, if we just work together in this kind of grassroots sort of way, and we're all connected a little bit more, and we use the internet and things like that we could all have the same infographic on our campaign Instagram. And like you said, only 5 people took her up on that offer, that unifying kind of messaging offer. And so why wouldn't you?
Well, and she makes a good point. She's like, we do have to govern in our own separate districts. You don't have to run on my...
Right. If you're from Ohio, maybe the New York City policies aren't for you.
Right. Well, and I think my biggest takeaway is people love to blame the word socialist. People love to blame the phrase defund the police for a lot of these things, which really those are largely Republican labels that the Democratic Party kind of cowered to and like just absorbed.
Yeah.
They had no counter argument. Democrats are good at governing. A lot of the times, if you look back at the stats and stuff, Democrats in office often get things done more often than Republicans do. Republicans are more of an obstructionist party where once they get in office, they just prevent anything
from happening.
They stop things from happening. And they're very good at campaigning and very good at marketing and very good at attacking the other party. The Democrats aren't good at defending themselves.
Voice. This is always the issue.
Well, defund the police was not something not a single person ran on defund the police. But what they were terrified of was being labeled that. And then also they're terrible at explaining what that actually means.
Right, which is reform the police.
Yeah.
And reform policing.
Yeah, but it's so hard to, because Republicans have been so good about, specifically with the police issue, about saying, oh, if you are against the police in any way, even reform, they would weaponize because they're just good at
Blue Lives Matter.
Exactly. So I think this is a time for the Democrats to have some real soul searching and real conversations within their own party to be like, hey, where do we stand collectively on some of the big issues? I think they can come together on Medicare for All.
I know, but then I think people hear taxes. That's going to raise our taxes, which is like always such a stupid response.
Which I would say.
You say that while you drive down a fucking road that was paved by fucking taxes.
True.
Where'd you go to school, bitch?
Do you know
everyone you know went to private Catholic school? No.
Do you remember in the primaries when they kept trying to go Warren to be like, well, how are you going to pay for it? Are you going to raise taxes? Are you going to raise taxes? And she refused to say yes, which got her dragged. And people were like, well, she's refusing. But she refused to give the Republican Party that soundbite of being like, yes, I'm raising taxes.
No shit. That's how I'm doing it.
Because it's hard to explain to people in a nuanced way with so many words to be like, yes, you're going to be paying for your health insurance via your taxes. But instead of giving that money to Blue Cross Blue Shield, you're giving it to the government and you just don't have a copay. You can just walk into the...
Yeah, but then people get so anecdotal. My friend, they work at the insurance company and they're going to get laid. Shit gets off the rails.
It's going to be an uphill climb regardless, but they need to get better at advertising their platforms and
explaining to people where taxes are going to be raised, for whom taxes are going to be raised. Now that doesn't really trickle down.
Okay, so with all of that said, I want to know, what do you think should be the strategy moving forward for the next 4 years within our party specifically? Because I can't speak to the Republicans; they have their own
thing.
They have their own journey to figure out. They have their own journey to figure out whether they're going to remain a party of Trump or if they're going to, transform this energy in some other way. But specifically with us, how do you think our party navigates this moderate lane and also, this progressive lane? What is our strategy? What do you think it should be in your experience?
I feel like I want to say, like, take it easy, take it slow, ease a bitch into it. But then, like, when you think about it, it's been since, like, the late 1950s that we've dealt with a lot of our progressive politics, and we haven't really seen a full circle decision on some of them.
Right.
Then I read what AOC wrote, and I saw this fucking Democratic lady on CNN today from Virginia. I said, you know what? Fuck that. It's been so long. We haven't done shit. What are we doing?
Right.
Why is the Equal Rights Act still a thing? Right. What do you mean?
And I find it...
Roe v. Wade shouldn't be up in the air. Some crazy old Irish man told me the other day, I'm Republican and I came to America to not pay taxes and blah, 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 blah. But that was the one thing that he was like, you know what though? And I would never tell a woman what to do with her body.
Yeah.
Like, that is like one thing that I think some people, even if they are super religious, which he was like, I believe in conception, is like the, fuck you and your heart beats and all that shit. I'm Catholic. I'm Irish. I believe the conception is the start of life. But I still can't tell you what to do with your ovaries.
Right. That's the one thing. So it's just interesting to me how. So yes, I think that there needs to be some sort of collective strategy. On paper, this is the one thing that I will say about both the moderate lane and the progressive lane. The gap between their beliefs and their platforms is not as wide as they let the Republicans describe us, and not as wide as they allow them. They've convinced themselves. Do you think that all is
like a greater manipulation, though?
What'd you say?
Like, on the Democrat side, do you think that they're kind of like trying to manipulate the message by saying, we're not that progressive, but we kind of are, but we are. Like, if you muddle what you mean, then no one can pinpoint what it is, kind of thing.
You think the Dems are doing that?
Yeah.
I would say yes, but at the same time, they're inconsistent with, if that is their strategy, they're very inconsistent with it. And frankly, them not being able to have a solid message
is always that's why issues from 1959 are still issues.
Yeah, because quite frankly, like Roe v. Wade should have had legislation at this point, like very clear, and not have just been a Supreme Court ruling. Same with same-sex marriage. Like
they don't want to take those steps to really dig their heels into certain things because a lot of people want to keep getting reelected, which is kind of the vibe I got from this Democrat from Virginia today, is that she cares more about in her district getting them votes.
Well, because frankly, like we're not pushing back enough on the Republican stances on these issues. Like the big thing with Roe v. Wade is they believe it's inherently murder. And I've heard Meghan McCain has said this on The View. She said,
of course she has.
She said she doesn't want to live in a country where murder is legal. But the counterpoint is, okay, but what about the police brutality that you don't want to address?
What about all that tenured legal murder, bitch?
Exactly.
What about letting people drink dirty water in Michigan? That's murder.
Exactly. So there's not enough pushback that you can package that and counteract and be like, hey, if that's the stance that you want to take and that's your argument, there's X, Y, and Z that's already going on in our country that we're also actively trying to fix, and y'all are blocking.
That's the issue, too, is that a lot of issues that I care about are about small, marginalized groups of people.
Exactly.
And those people kind of, they don't really have a lot of resources.
Right.
It's really hard to get a Native American tribe, say, on the same page as an urban center,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they all are kind of saying the same thing, which I thought America was equality for all.
Right.
So why is X, Y, or Z happening to my community?
Because and then the Republican response is often it's about the individual.
Asked for it.
Yeah, it's about the individual bringing themselves up, not about a group. Yeah. Stop playing identity politics.
The issue with Flint, Michigan is this. The issue with this is this. And instead of it being the greater issue with our country is that we tend to allow people who don't have resources to be pushed down.
Right.
And we don't follow that ideal of equality for all as much as we maybe brand ourselves as.
Right. Well, it's because
it's like when you see the college brochure and everyone's like happy and diverse, and then you go to college and everybody is white and named Ashley. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, and it's because they campaign to demographics and not to individuals. Where if we legislated and gave everybody literally the equal footing, then you can then take that step and appeal to the individual. But nobody feels like an individual when they're grouped into their subset marginalized communities because you're not giving them the opportunities.
And Republicans see it too, like, I'm not Native American.
Right.
Why the fuck's about to give them money?
Exactly.
Instead of understanding that if we all get lifted up to more of the same level, how great that greater good would be.
And individually, because it's the exceptionalism argument that we've had before. A lot of these even poor Republicans that are like, well, I don't want to pay for X, Y, and Z. Well, do you realize that if you were ever in a position, you could also take advantage of that? You're putting money into it. You can take advantage of that. But they feel that they're above that and that they will never have to.
Until March 17th rolls around and they all fucking file for unemployment.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, look at right now. This is a perfect example in this pandemic right now. That we all have had to take advantage of this system that we've paid into to some degree. Yeah. Some people in food stamps, some people in mass unemployment, some people, in other ways, state-run healthcare. There's some ways.
You're going to get a free flu shot this year?
Yeah. So
when this vaccine comes out.
So needless to say, this win is just the beginning of a long road. The only thing that makes it very that is helpful in it being optimistic is that there is now an opportunity to address some of these things, whereas obviously if Trump was there would be no opportunity.
And also 10 years ago, we didn't have an AOC.
We didn't.
We didn't have some of the people that we at least do have right now.
Well, and even Bernie. Bernie was not in prominence the way that he is now in the national conversation. So
people agree now with what he says. It's not some crazy thing. Is one of the first things that's apparently going to go through is $50,000 federal student loan debt. When Bernie Sanders brought that up, people were like, "You're crazy."
And now it's legitimate policy.
Take all of your tie-dye t-shirts and your devil's lettuce with your crazy ideas. Get out of here, Vermont.
Yeah.
And now the whole country is like, "Oh, this is actually maybe a good idea."
This might be a good idea because they realize.
I don't know with that.
Yeah, because there's a whole generation that is going to be stunted, and our country would flounder if we didn't help that.
Yeah, get on TikTok and you will see that a bitch is progressive. The next generation is progressive as fuck. We thought we were progressive.
Yeah, we are the.
Me and my girlfriends were like, we're bisexual. We're so progressive. You're black, I'm white. Yes, the kids, the generation before us are like screaming at their history teachers, fighting with their parents. I didn't have the balls to do all that.
Even Claudia Conway.
I said, yes, you're right, Mom. Birds of a feather flock together. Goodbye.
Even Claudia Conway is in that.
Claudia Conway is the queen of all of that, but that's also scary.
Also scary.
And I saw a lot of things that like the Democrats need to not make somebody's child their poster child.
Beacon of hope.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to talk about people like AOC and what she has to say.
Yeah. So more AOC, more progressive
AOC,
policies,
more Stacey Abrams,
yeah,
less Claudia Conway.
And we have, and I feel like we always talk about elections all the time in America because we only have 2 years till midterms again, and then that's where we can get more seats.
All the time.
We can make up some.
And then what if Charlie Baker gets put into Biden's cabinet, which some people are discussing because he's a moderate Republican and he's a Republican who's been very liberal in the way he's dealt with COVID. Yeah. And he's probably never getting reelected in Massachusetts. So it's probably best if he does get a cabinet job for him, personally.
Yeah.
So if he goes, then we have to vote for a new governor.
Because Dems are done with him, and also I don't think the GOP of Massachusetts, wherever they are in our state, I don't think they're very happy with his progressive approach.
No,
to COVID.
The people that are Republican that voted for him hate his guts, I'm sure. Because
he's been very strict about COVID.
He's you have to go to bed. It's 9:30. Go to bed.
But we'll button up this conversation with there's hope for COVID. We got a vaccine on the horizon.
That's true.
And we have somebody coming into office who cares and has a plan.
Who is like, oh, you're a scientist? That is a good thing. Let me listen to you.
Oh, a mask?
What's wrong with wearing a mask? Nothing. Let's wear them.
So either way, there's a lot to be hopeful for this week. And but that doesn't mean people haven't been having a time. So when we're back,
that's true.
We'll discuss who's been having a time. All right. And we're back. So Claire, who is having a time this week?
Ronald McDonald. McDonald's, first of all, McDonald's breaking news. McRib's coming back December 2nd.
I mean, that does have a huge cult following.
It has a huge cult following. It's a great way to cap 2020. It's something to be thankful for.
It's like the Thai Beanie Babies for McDonald's, but in food.
Right. It tastes like 1989, and I like that.
And I like that.
I love McDonald's. McDonald's gets a bad rap. And you know what?
It's always there when you need it.
It's always there when you need it. When you have no money, it's $1 to eat a chicken sandwich. But the real reason why they're having a time is because I think that they kind of always stick to this classical model and they don't really change a lot, but they're going to. They have a McPlant burger coming out. So Whoppers were Beyond Meat for a little bit, or Impossible Meat, or whatever fucking company made up the fake meat.
Right.
And they did it was Impossible. Because they did the Impossible Whopper. Yeah. Well, Beyond is the competitor, and they have worked with McDonald's, so their stock actually plummeted.
They work with Dunkin's too.
They work with Dunkin's too. They do all the Beyond sausage things at Dunkin' Donuts. Love it.
Love it. Not sponsored.
So at first, Beyond Meat's stock dipped because people thought it was like a proprietary competitor that McDonald's, because they always make up their own shit.
Right.
That's why they're so successful and make so much fucking money.
Right.
But apparently Beyond Meat, it was like a collab like they did with Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, wow.
So I'm excited because we know we have a base that we like.
Yes.
There's going to be a chicken and a burger.
Are they going to do it in the style of like some of their classic burgers?
I have not heard tale yet, but imagine a Big Mac.
Oh my God.
Because really a Big Mac is just a vessel for that mayonnaise-y shit that they put on it that tastes so good.
So it's not going to be vegan. It'll be like...
It won't be vegan.
No.
My whole thing is like I can't be a vegetarian because I have no willpower. And I love bacon, and burnt ends, and ribs, cheeseburgers. But if there's something that tastes like a cheeseburger, because really the whole point of a cheeseburger is just the bread and the cheese and the sauce.
Right.
It's an unpopular opinion. You know, some people like mayonnaise and cheeseburgers. Some people don't. Some people like McDonald's. Some people don't.
Some people don't.
I personally fucking love it.
I do. There's nothing like a trashy fast food meal sometimes.
Yes. And I can tell you about every fast food, what the best item on the menu is, who has the best chicken nuggets, who has the best fries. You want to talk in depth about the dessert options at a fast food restaurant, I got you.
Oh my God. That in the future, you're going to compile a list for us. We need to know.
I can talk about chicken fries from Burger King with zesty sauce for 20 minutes.
We'll do a special mukbang.
Oh my God, yes. Just watch me getting stoned, eating fucking chalupas. Love it.
Yes.
So yes, McDonald's is having time. They have McRibs. They have the classic nostalgia McRib. We're going to do a shamrock shake. Also, we're going to mix it up. We got McPlants. And I'm here for it. I'm excited. I can't wait to one day maybe get a McRib and a McPlant in my one DoorDash order. Uber Eats order from McDonald's because I'm an American and I'm trash.
And that's what I do.
That's what I do. So who do you think is having a time?
Okay, so I can't tell you exactly who is having a time in this scenario. It's hard
to pinpoint.
I think it's everyone involved, but
it could be a group time.
It is a group time.
A group activity.
Oh God.
You can't even say it.
So, if y'all didn't know, the day that this was even before it was being called for the election on Saturday, they were planning a press conference with Rudy Giuliani and the Trump team to talk. And they were calling this before even Biden had won the election officially. And Trump tweeted out that it was going to be at the Four Seasons Landscape and Towing. So it was confused to be the Four Seasons Hotel. The Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia then had to tweet out and say, no, it's not us.
Just so you know.
It's just this other place. Cool. Seems harmless. Harmless mix-up. It should be fine. Where is it? The footage starts coming out. In the photos, where this thing is, it is this in an alley, a side street.
It's very much an episode of Sopranos kind of vibe.
Oh my God. It is
down by the docks.
It's hysterical. You see Rudy Giuliani, people behind him, some press, standing in front of this garage next to an adult toy store.
Right. A dildo store.
A dildo store in the most like rundown looking alleyway in Northeast Philly.
If this doesn't speak to the male ego, to being stubborn, sticking your feet. No, I meant to be here.
I meant to be here.
Like there's a park. There's a high school football field. There was some shit that they could have reworked within a 0.5 mile radius and gone somewhere else and been like, we're here from like Bucks County Junior High because like God. America and football. They could have reworked it 1,000 different ways, done literally anything else. The weird park in your hometown that had too much geese and was covered in geese shit would have been a more appropriate place than this weird, creepy beginning of a comic book movie murder scene. And your Rudy Giuliani's people have all the connections in the world, particularly in this area of the world, to fix this.
Right.
And they were just like, no, we wanted to be here.
Someone showed up and was like,
small business. Look, they sell small dildos.
So I don't know. I just think the imagery, the fuckery of it all.
You're literally next to a dumpster fire.
A dumpster fire and an adult toy store. Right. And not to mention, the guy he brought to speak with him was a charged sexual predator for showing his penis to children.
Which is probably why they couldn't rework to the park idea. Maybe that's why, because he's not allowed to be near schools.
So
they're like, we have to do it in an abandoned parking lot.
The full narrative, the full picture of it all just really sums up what the last 4 years have been. And that's why I'm like...
old white men.
Who's having a time.
Just having a time next to the dildo store.
I don't know who's having more of a time, but I know that I thoroughly enjoyed the imagery, especially when the images came out. It was almost simultaneously within the hour of Biden being called as president-elect.
Embarrassing.
It was very much like, oh, of course. It felt like we got like shifted back into the right dimension. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've been living in the alternate world, and then suddenly the universe was like, you guys are done. You're back.
Right. Strip malls have had a great year too.
Strip malls,
between like Robert Kraft getting a hand job in them and like political campaign doing a speech from one. Oh. You've really seen more dildo shops on the news these days, and we love to see it.
Are they the main character of 2020? Who
secretly knows? Women who sell dildos are the real winners of 2020. Imagine.
Could you imagine? I don't know.
Could you imagine?
I just felt the metaphor of it all was just amazing.
They would have been better off outside of a fucking McDonald's.
Yeah.
In front of a McRib poster.
Ugh.
And that would have been just as slightly embarrassing, but it wouldn't have been a sex shop next to an abandoned warehouse.
Also, it's not that far, and these people on these campaigns travel long distances like all the time, especially within a day. You couldn't just have gone to Trump's hotel in DC.
I know, just get on the bus.
Just get on the bus and go to DC and go to Trump's hotel.
There's gotta be a Marriott somewhere in South Jersey that they gotta connect with. You know what I mean? Like,
and then followed by.
You don't want to admit that you're wrong. So you're like, no, I wanted to do it. Four Seasons Landscaping to represent small businesses.
Which is fine. We're not knocking that. We're not knocking the company. We're just knocking the fact that like the pictures.
I don't know. I'm going to kind of knock the company because while Four Seasons is a really good name for a landscaping company in theory, it's clearly already been taken for something else that has huge brand recognition. So
true.
Sorry, Tony, who owns the landscaping company.
Trump and Co. don't love a research.
Right, like I don't know.
They don't love to research. But yeah, and I'll just put a pin in it in that soonly after, we saw Trump coming back from his golf trip looking sad. And it was just like, this has been perfect. A perfect day. Bookended.
His golf course that you brought up, he goes to every day.
Watching the celebrations in the street.
Just sad. Sad and very lonely, I'd say.
I mean, if he wasn't such an asshole, I would be like, oh. But
yeah, I mean, it was a little like medieval times up there. People were stomping on Cheetos. Like, the king has fallen.
Like, wonder what that kind of level of humiliation feels like. I hope none of us ever have to experience that. But if you're listening to this happily, then you're likely not the type of person that needs to. Right. So
I don't think a lot of people who have trust funds listen to our podcast.
True. So. Who knows? Maybe.
You never know.
You never know. Some people may be looking to experience what real Americans are like.
Right. Home folk.
And they may realize that they're too privileged and they need to experience it.
One can only hope.
Well, that's it. We really didn't even... I gave you homework to listen to Ariana's positions, and we didn't get into it, but
She got into it, though.
She is getting into it.
I know what you mean by the sexualness of it. I've never heard so many lyrics about euphemisms for getting eaten out, and I'm here for it.
She says she keeps it squeaky.
That's a WAP reference that's in depth.
Yes.
That requires a lot of imagination.
Not a lot of imagination. Not
I guess
too much.
Not a lot of imagination.
Not too much.
Positions, though, has already become a song in the bar that everybody sings along to, just like Thank You
That's
Next.
Good. She's an icon.
She's an icon. Legend. People love her. Everybody loves her. At the bar I've worked at, I've only worked there for like 3 months, and already somebody gay has said, the greatest day of my life is listening to Ariana Grande in this bar. That's icon status.
Icon status.
I mean, I haven't even been in the bar that long, but somebody's had that moment. You know what I mean?
Well, moving forward, hopefully next week, we'll have some more positive news. This has been a largely positive.
Yeah, I mean, I
discussion.
feel like McRibs positive.
McRibs. I mean, even the election positive. We just got some discussion, so I'm sure there's going to be some news. Maybe we'll have a concession speech to talk about. Highly doubt it. But we'll likely have some more news on this vaccine, which will be very exciting.
The vaccine's exciting.
Very exciting.
Good for you, Pfizer, for not taking any government money and still figuring it out before everybody else.
Well, that's it, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.